Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to see how to use Pygmy with respect to creating the device, creating the endpoint, and registering that device to the endpoint, and then how do we ingest data to that endpoint. I'll first start with the application that you see in front, and before that I would like to tell you that the application is running on a Tomcat container, and that's running on my local desktop. And the screen that you see here is the login screen for Pygmy. So the first thing we need to do is to log into the application. So I'll just use the credentials, which is admin, and the password is admin123, and log into the application. On the left hand side you see all the menus. So we can manage devices, that is, we can create and view the list of devices, we can delete them, we can manage endpoints, we can manage registrations, which is registering the device with the cloud endpoint, and we can also do endpoint testing. Under that we can perform two functions, which is ingest data to the endpoint, and the second is test the latency of the endpoint. And finally we can store these results and we can view those results for later use. So the first thing we'll do is we'll just try to create our first device into Pygmy. Now before that we need to understand that what exactly a device means. So in Pygmy, a device is a representation of a physical and actual device that is residing on the field. It could be a smart washing machine, it could be an electric motor, it could be a caterpillar, or it could be anything. For example, a smart air conditioner or any home device. So what we do first is simulate that device into Pygmy. So assume that we are going to develop an application, or rather we already have an application, that is for the smart home, and we are trying to monitor the washing machine which is installed in your house. So the first device that we create is a smart washing machine. So this field goes for the name of the device, which I'm going to just enter as smart washing machine. So once you have the device name, what you can do is you can add properties to that device. Let us assume we have got two fields or two properties to that machine. The first one is the RPM, or the rotations per minute, and the second one is the water level. So assume that these are the two fields which we are monitoring for that washing machine. So I'll just go on and define these two fields. Now Pygmy allows you to create devices or properties of three different types. One is a string, which is just a constant string. For example, the label name of the machine, or let's say the model number. The second is long, for example, fields like RPM. And the third is double, for example, the fields which have got decimal values, for example, the temperature or maybe humidity. And we'll define a minimum value for it, which is 2500 to 3000. So the max value is 3000. What this means is that when we start ingesting data for this device, so the value for the RPM would be generated between this range. Now we have a second parameter. So to add one more field, we just click on this plus button and we define our second field, which is the water level. Now water level could be in decimals, so we'll choose double type and we'll give a water level which could range between 23.5 to, let's say, 27.5. So assume we only have two fields for this device. Ideally Pygmy supports up to 10 properties for any device you create. So once you're done with this, you just go on to click the create device button, and now you see that this device is created for you. And what you can see now is the view all devices screen, which is the view screen. And if I want to know what are the details of this device, so I just click on this eye symbol, and in a pop-up I am clearly shown that field 1 is RPM, it's of type long, min value is 2500, the max value is 3000, and so on. Okay, so we have created our first device, which is a smart washing machine. You also get the timestamp. So the next thing we need to do is we create an endpoint. Now I'll tell you what an endpoint is. So an endpoint represents the cloud endpoint on which you are developing your IoT application. And at this point, Pygmy supports three IoT platforms, which are Microsoft Azure IoT Hub, IBM Watson IoT Platform, and AWS IoT. So in order to register your device to the endpoint, you need to define that endpoint into Pygmy. So what you do is you just give a logical name to your endpoint. For example, let's say that I have an endpoint of type IBM Watson IoT Platform. So I give a logical name which is Watson IoT P001, and I choose the Watson IoT P endpoint type. At the same time, you can see that now I have to provide these three values for the endpoint, which are specific to IBM Watson IoT Platform: the org ID, the API key, and the authentication token. So I provide these values and I just create my endpoint. So now I have this endpoint created for me. Similarly, I just imagine that I am also doing development in parallel on AWS IoT and Azure IoT Hub. So the next thing I do is also create two more endpoints. So for Azure, I have to just provide the Azure connection string. So I provide the Azure connection string and I just create my second endpoint, which is of type Microsoft Azure IoT Hub. I just need to create one more endpoint of type AWS IoT. So again, I go to create. So now you can see that for AWS IoT, I need to provide these three fields, which is AWS endpoint, the access key ID, and the secret access key. And you'll find all these three fields on your AWS IoT portal. So once again, I provide these three values and I just create my third endpoint. So now I have an endpoint of each of the three types, which is supported by Pygmy. But of course, these values will need to come from the endpoint that you have. Now the third thing I need to do is I need to register my device on these IoT platforms, or maybe just one platform. That depends on how many types of different IoT endpoints is your application using. So when I go to the register endpoint, what I do is I first select the type of endpoint. So let's say that I first want to register my device to IBM Watson IoT Platform. The next thing is I just select my device, which is smart washing machine. So Pygmy will automatically show you all the devices that you have created in the system. Now, when you register your device with Watson IoT Platform, you need to provide an authentication token and a device type. So authentication token is the token which your device will use in the future to connect with the Watson IoT Platform. And device type is category of device to which this device would belong. So now I'll take you to the Watson IoT Platform dashboard. So the one here which you're seeing right in front is the console for the IBM Watson IoT Platform. And you can see, I just don't have any device. At the same time, if I click on the device types, I can see that I don't really have any device type existing. So what I do is I just create a device type and give a name to it. And then I just click on next. If I want, I can optionally choose these fields. I'm not going to fill these. Then I create my first device type. So now you see that I have a device type washing machine. Now I come back to the devices. So still I don't have any device here. Now I go back to Pygmy application. So the device type I am going to choose for my smart washing machine is washing machine device type, which I just created in Watson IoT Platform. Make sure that the case is not upper or lower. It matches with the one that you defined on the IoT console. So the next thing you do is you register your device. Oops, I just missed the device auth token. So I just choose auth1234. Now I register my device. So now you see that this device has been registered. So now I should also be able to see this on Watson IoT Platform. So if I refresh, you can see that I have a smart washing machine which is just registered. few seconds back. Similarly, I would also like to register, maybe you may not have all the three platforms, but just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to also register this device onto the Azure IoT Hub. So I choose the endpoint type Microsoft Azure IoT Hub. The endpoint automatically gets populated. I select the device and I say register device. So in a few minutes, this device also got registered on Azure IoT Hub. So now I'll take you to the Azure IoT Hub instance which I have currently, and this is the device explorer of within the Azure IoT Hub. So if I just refresh it, I'll be able to see that device which I just registered, and you can see in the device explorer now my smart washing machine is appearing at the bottom. So I just have this device registered on Azure IoT Hub. So similarly, the third endpoint, which is AWS IoT, is what you can see here. This is the console of AWS IoT, the instance which I own. Using Pygmy, now I'm also going to register my device on AWS IoT. So this is the endpoint instance which I just created minutes back. This is my device. And so this is the MQTT topic which will be used later on when you ingest data with this device. So, and then AWS IoT gives you an option to define the device type. So either you can choose one if you really have a device type created in the AWS IoT, or you can just leave it blank. So for example, if I go back to the AWS IoT console, you see within registry I have got things and I've got types. So here I just have created a type called washing machine. I've also got few other, but at this point I'm just interested in this. If you want to create a new one, you can just do, you can just click on create and create a new one. And back to things, you can see that I just have two devices, Caterpillar CX UK67 and another one, but I don't yet have this device registered there. So I choose a device type, and you just have to ensure that the case is matching with the one which exists in AWS IoT. And now I register this device. So now you can see that the same device also got registered on AWS IoT instance, which I just defined in Pygmy. Now if I go to the AWS IoT console, there you see the smart washing machine had just got registered. So coming back to Pygmy, so here you have all the three registered devices, and if you just click on the eye, you should be able to see the auth token, the endpoint type, and so on. Similarly for Azure IoT Hub, this is the device auth token which was returned by Azure IoT Hub. Similarly for AWS IoT, there is no any auth token, but these are the respective details. So at the end of it, now you have your devices. We've just defined one device, and we have defined three endpoints of three different types, and then we registered the same device on all the three platforms. So in a way, you can clearly see that Pygmy is cloud agnostic. So it doesn't let you bother what are the complexities lying with each of the three different platforms, but it just gives you a very simple interface to register your device onto each of these three. But this is just the registration that we have done. The next thing that you'd like to do is ingest data onto these platforms. So if I go to the ingest data screen, you can see that there are a whole lot of fields that we need to fill or select. So the first thing we do is we select the endpoint type. For example, let's assume that I want to ingest the device data onto the IBM Watson IoT platform. So I choose the endpoint type and I choose the protocol. You only see MQTT here because this is the only protocol supported by Watson IoT platform. And Pygmy only gives you the option to push data in JSON format for this given type, endpoint type. And then you choose the endpoint instance, which is Watson IoT 001, and you also choose the device. So you will see all the registered devices, here, which have been registered with this particular instance. Now you've got two choices to make. Either you can ingest data in a streaming mode, which is a continuous mode, and Pygmy would allow you to ingest up to 1 million data points in a go. So here you need to define the number of messages, but if you just do before that, it will ask you to enter the number of messages. So let's assume that to begin with, I would want to ingest 1000 data points to this particular endpoint. So if I go back to the IBM Watson IoT platform and I just click on this device which is registered, when the Pygmy application starts ingesting data, you would see all those JSON data points appearing here, and this is what we are just going to do next. So I'm just going to ingest 1000 messages or data. So I just do start, and this is a progress bar which I see. Now if I it has finished in a while. So if you see here on the Watson IoT platform console, you see all these JSONs. You see device ID, smart washing machine, RPM 2879, water level 26.27, and you see where these numbers are coming from. That if you remember that when we defined this device, the RPM value, the minimum maximum, we set to 2500 to 3000. Similarly, water level was set between something like 23.5 to maybe 27 or something. So the number that you see here, they are exactly belonging to that range. Similarly, if I see the next data point, 2605, 24.02, or any other. So going back to Pygmy, now you see that this is done. The time taken to establish the connection was 2734 milliseconds, and it fired 1000 messages, and the total time taken to fire these messages were 1291 milliseconds. So now if you want, you can store this result. You can just click on save, and Pygmy will save this result for you. So now what you're seeing here is the view results screen for ingestion results. So for smart washing machine, the endpoint name was Watson IoT 001, and you ingested a data using MQTT protocol. The connection time was this much, number of messages 1000, total time was this. And if you want, you can see all these details even here. You can ingest the the data for this device in any of these endpoint types, because you have registered your smart washing machine with an Azure endpoint and an AWS endpoint as well. So I mean, the same device can be used to ingest data on AWS IoT or Microsoft Azure IoT Hub. And when you select Microsoft Azure IoT Hub, you see that you have two choices for the protocol, because Azure supports both these protocols. So for example, I may choose to ingest using AMQP protocol. At the same time, Pygmy allows you to ingest in JSON or XML. Once again, I want to ingest data in streaming mode. This time, let's say I want to ingest 50,000 data points. So I just click on start, and Pygmy will do it for you. So you can see that it just took 35 milliseconds. Or if I just go to the overview section, you would see that you have one device in all, total one device registered with Azure IoT Hub, and you can see it just shows you 1 out of 400K, but this will refresh very soon and it should show you 50,000 messages probably in a while if you revisit this page, maybe after 4, 5 or 10 minutes. Let's go back to Pygmy. Now, so these two examples that you saw, they were examples of data ingestion in streaming mode, and this is really helpful when you want to ingest a high volume of data to your IoT endpoint, because probably you would want to test the throughput or maybe the performance of your IoT endpoint. For example, you might have created a data processing component or behind Azure IoT Hub or Watson IoT Platform or AWS IoT. And to test that, you need to ingest some high volume of data. So probably then you can use this tool and you can use the streaming mode, and you can have 5 or 6 different instances of this application running in 5 or 6 different browsers, and simultaneously you can create 5 or 6 different devices and start ingesting from each of these devices. So in a very few seconds, you can have a few million data points being ingested to your IoT endpoint. So that was about the streaming mode. Now I want to take you through the demo of the intermittent mode. So here I assume that I am simulating a device which is typical in an IoT scenario. It throws a data point every 5 seconds or every 10 seconds. So I just want to simulate that device. So then I would choose the endpoint, I would choose my devices, and then I would say I want to ingest data in intermittent mode, and I want to ingest every 3 seconds to this instance. So now you see that it makes a connection similar to what we saw earlier, and then you can see there's a pause of 3 seconds between each data ingestion. So now after 3 seconds you will see this to become 6 and 7 and so on, and this is the total time taken in ingesting these 7 or 8 messages. And while calculating these the total time taken, Pygmy does not count the pause which was mentioned by you between the 2 data points, which was 3 seconds. So now if I go to the Watson IoT platform, whole thing before that, you can just see that the signal of this, which says that the device is connected, which means Pygmy has already made a connection. And now if I see the screen, you'll very soon you see there's just a data point has arrived, then another one, and you see the time interval between these. It is exactly 3 seconds. So this is a very typical IoT scenario which you're replicating using Pygmy. Now if you want to stop, I mean, you can just leave it and it will go on for days. But for now I'm just going to stop it. So now Pygmy has just stopped me, but in the meanwhile it has ingested 32 data points for me in a span of 30 milliseconds. Now again, like before, I can choose to save this result. Now you see that again, similar to the above, this time the connection time was 1838 milliseconds, total 32 messages ingested in a time span of 13 milliseconds. So again, you can see that this ingestion thing or the functionality is in a way cloud agnostic. You don't really care what are the complexities, and Pygmy just gives you all those control using a very simple user interface. So that's all about device data ingestion, and I hope this video was very useful for you. Thank you.